referencing. What is it and why do we do it? Referencing is what we do in text, in writing, in essays, if we want to refer to an author, someone else's work. We're not omnipotent. We don't know everything. We're not all-knowing. There are limits to the knowledge that we have. And when working, when writing, we draw on the knowledge of others. This is natural. If you don't know about something, you Google it. You find a resource about it, someone that does know. However, it's not really fair to the person that wrote that initial stuff to just take their work. That's not fair on them. And that's not fair for you, because you wouldn't like if someone took your stuff. So that's why we reference. Referencing is a way of using someone else's knowledge, someone else's ideas, and incorporating it into your own work, because we don't know everything. Now, for an example of this, it's most obviously used in a history context. It's the easiest way to make sense of it. If we're writing some kind of essay about ancient Greece, the Industrial Revolution, or whenever, we weren't there at the time. We weren't there at the time. So quite frankly, we don't actually know for sure anything that occurred during that time period. So if we say in our words, yes, ancient Greeks, they had a philosophy. Well, that's not very useful, because we don't actually know that they had philosophy. We might actually have to look at another source, something maybe primary, something from the time, and say, yes, Plato. Plato said there was philosophy. You have to look at someone else's work and draw from that, because we don't know for sure. So how does referencing appear actually in a piece of writing? Because, okay, it's great, referencing is referring to someone else's stuff, but what does it look like in writing? Well, in writing, there are two main types of referencing. In text and reference list. Okay, that's the two main things we're talking about, and that's pretty much all of referencing. Now, there's a large variety of referencing styles, and I'm not going into referencing styles in regards to this tutorial. This is the basics of referencing. Okay, and referencing, how you reference, changes from the type of sources you're dealing with. So if you're dealing with a book, it's a bit different to how you work with a website. This tutorial is looking at websites, as websites are our most common form of referencing in these days, I would say. Not too many people open up books anymore, as sad as it is. Of course, it's very similar and the skill works across. If you can do this, then you can definitely work with books and stuff too. It's not too much of a stretch. So, a reference list. How do we do a reference list? What does it look like? Well, a reference list usually sits at the end of your document, of whatever you're working on. And at the end of that document, you'll have maybe something that says reference list, and then you'll have a list of every source you use. Usually you press tab as well at the start so it indents the line. It's just something nice for bookkeeping that most people do. So, how do we do a reference with a reference list? So let's say we just went through a website. We have to find a couple of details, all right? And we order it in this order. We have author, date, name of the website, and the URL. And this is how it looks. What we do is we write author, so the actual name of the person that wrote the website, then the date, okay? And we have a full stop after the author. Then, and this is where it gets interesting, we actually do the title of the website. Now the title of the website, sometimes that can be a bit confusing, but something that attributes what the website's called. So we do the title. Now this, the title, is in italics, which means it's got that slant. Of course, it's capitalized. Title, then retrieved from. This does not have to be in italics. From. And then, after retrieved from, you put your URL. So www.x.com. That's how you do referencing for your reference list, and that appears at the end of your text. So if I was to run through an example, right, I would start with the author. So we could have Trump D. That's actually a very important part, all right? Having the last name first for the author. Sometimes with an author as well, you might actually have a person, an individual, as the author. You might have a company as the author. So you might have to look at where the website is put. For example, you might have British Petroleum, stop, which is okay. Next up, we have in-text referencing. And in-text referencing is easy peasy. Quite often people overcomplicate in-text referencing when thinking about it. It's straightforward. If you're gathering information from someone and you say something that's their idea, you do brackets, author, comma, date. Now, if using a book, usually you have to include the page number. And as I mentioned, going from referencing style to referencing style, you are required to do certain different things. But usually author, date, and page number if it's a book. So what does that look like? Well, brackets, author, comma, date. So as well for author apply as with the reference list. So you do this the last name in this case. It's just the last name that goes here. So you might have, for example, Page, with Page being the last name, like Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, comma, 1976, brackets. And that's all you have to put in text. However, how do you put this in text is the confusing part. Because I did say before, people do worry a bit about this stuff too much. How does it appear in text? How should it look? What should it look like? And the biggest mistake people make when doing in-text citations is they end up putting the whole reference in there that should belong in the reference list, and it looks a bit messy. You keep it really simple with in-text. Or the other mistake people make when talking about in-text citations is they are too scared to do it. So instead of using someone else's information or using a quote, they end up just using the information and not putting the reference in there, which usually for most assignments brings you down because you're drawing on what should be your ideas, what should be other people's ideas, but you're just saying this is all your own, which isn't very academic. So, how do we do it in text? There's two main ways: paraphrasing and quotation. A quoting is something that goes in dialogue marks, so a quote. So you might say, Page states, and then have your quotation marks. I like chicken, quotation marks, and then you go brackets, Page, comma, 2016. And that's pretty straightforward. And of course you have lead up for your sentence beforehand. The second way you may want to do this is paraphrasing. I love paraphrasing. It's very powerful and it usually makes flowing with your written piece a lot easier. Paraphrasing at first, I must say, is really daunting. It really doesn't make sense, especially if you've been strictly brought up on a quoting kind of system. Paraphrasing is you might draw some reference to the author. You might say, oh yes, Page states, oh yes, he refers to, mentions. And then you rewrite what he says in your own words. So you rewrite what the author says in your own words. And then at the end, you just do your brackets, author, date. And that's it. The advantage of that is you can make it flow, because sometimes the statement that you're getting mightn't quite make sense if you're just plopping it in your assignment. You might need to rework how it reads a bit, so it's nice and clear, because we want to be nice and clear. So, that is a really basic guide to referencing. This is the bare bones, but it is enough to get you started if you're moving into academic writing and you really need to make sure your referencing is clear, coherent, and exceptional. I'd say this is referring to web referencing, so stuff that is on the internet, websites that you find. So make sure that you're using the correct referencing type for certain things. There are plenty of websites that you can go to around the correct way of referencing. So make sure you refer to those if necessary. This is in the APA style. It's a beginner's guide. See you next time. Thank you.